Welcome to Draw Tip Tuesday. Here's your weekly dose of inspiration to build a creative habit, one drawing at a time. Brought to you by Sketchbook Skool.
Hello and welcome to Draw Tip Tuesday. I'm so happy you are here. And today's Draw Tip Tuesday is going to be a little bit different than usual. Not just because it's live streaming, because I am still not really used to that. I hope you like it though. I really love to see that people are hanging out here. Hello, Zoe and Joyce and Sabrina and Kit. And I see Yara and I see my dad, Franz, of course, he's also there. Robert, a lot of, usual suspects, which is great. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Um, so it is a little bit unusual today. Why is that? Well, you may or may not know that I have been using the iPad for a few months now, and I'm really just still learning, and there is so much to learn. And I do understand a little bit what I can do with Procreate on the iPad, but I just barely scratch the surface. That's really how it feels. And there's so much to learn. There are so many ways to do even one simple thing. So I know a lot of you watching do have an iPad and are very curious how to do certain things, which is great because we do have an iPad course coming up at Sketchbook Skool, and I can tell you a little bit more about that later. But first, before all that, let's just do that tip. Let's give you that tip. I'm not giving you the tip today. I brought in a special guest today. Guess who it is? Hello.
Hello.
So here he is, my partner in crime, Danny Gregory. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here in Amsterdam with you, and we've had a fun week or so hanging out. And I've never been on Draw Tip Tuesday before, although
No.
of course I've watched lots of them, so it's exciting to be on the other side of it.
I think you're actually my first guest too, so that's
I'm honored in that
a
case.
milestone and actually pretty fun. So, and you have been drawing on the iPad for quite a while.
I have. I've been drawing on it for a couple of years now, and I figured out a lot of the things that were confusing to me, and there's always a lot of things still to learn, and they're always making it even more interesting. But I think I've learned a few things, and I'd be glad to teach you some tips.
Excellent. How about just diving in?
Okay, so what I wanted to talk about was how do you color a drawing that you've done on the iPad? So you've done a line drawing, but now you want to color it. And I sat down to think about it, and I came up with, I think, 10 different ways to color something in. So I wanted to take you through a bunch of them and go and see if they're helpful. So we're going to switch to show you what my screen looks like. And and then we'll be in the corner, right? So
I think so.
Okay. So here is a little drawing that I just did of a teacup, and I want to now color it in. So let's have a look at this. So the most obvious thing to do is I have my pen. I've selected a pink color here, and I'm going to just go in and color it. So I can just take my pen and I can color it. Now, this is the most straightforward thing. This is sort of the equivalent of having a marker and just coloring it on a drawing. But as you can see, it's difficult. It's not perfect. It's not perfectly filling it in. It's going over, and the edge is kind of a bit wonky. So that's like a crude way of doing it, but it may not be what you really want to do. So let's try coloring in some other parts using other techniques. So let's change colors. So I'm going to pick an orange color now. And let's have a look at the layers. So right now, I have just the one layer, the layer that has my drawing on it with that pink circle. And now I'm going to add another layer by clicking that plus sign. And I'm going to take this layer, I'm going to put it below my drawing. So basically what I'm doing now is I have a drawing sitting on top. And so what happens is when I color, so now I'm going to color, am I on that layer? Yes, so I'm on that layer, layer 2, and I'm coloring it in. And see, what's nice about this is the black line, I don't have to worry about it so much. It's nice and clean because it is sitting underneath that black heavy line. So there's my layer. So okay, so that's a very straightforward way of doing it. But now let's try something else that's cool. So we'll take another color, change our color to pink. We'll go back to that top layer where the cup was. And now we can just simply go over here to where this pink is in the corner. I can drag it over and I can just drop it into my dot, and it magically fills it in. I don't have to color anything at all, right? That's pretty cool. Very useful. You can color in any enclosed shape by just dragging and dropping. Okay, now one of the great things about Procreate, the ability to use layers, means that you might want to put your color on a separate layer, kind of like what we did to this background. But let's say we want, and later on we might want to do something else to it, and I'll show you what those things are. But let's add another layer, and we're going to put, it doesn't really matter whether it's above or below, but just for the sake of having our numerical order, we'll keep it below. So now what I want to do is I want to color in this circle, but I don't want to color it in on my drawing, right? Because when I dropped that pink, I dropped it onto the same layer that my line drawing was, and that's not, in this case I want to put it on a separate layer. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, what I'm going to do now is I go to my layer, I touch it, and this menu shows up on the side. And I'm going to just select reference. What reference means is that on this other layer, it's going to use my line drawing as a reference to tell me where these other colors should go. So now I pick purple, and I'm going to go and color this. I'm going to drag and drop this layer. I fill that in just like I did before, but it's on a separate layer now. You see, so I can turn it on and off. Whereas if I went to my original layer and tried to turn off that pink, I'd be turning off the whole thing. So that's not as helpful. It's great to have things on separate layers. So by using it as a reference, everything I do will always refer back to that layer where my drawing was. Is that clear?
That's excellent.
Okay, it's
yes.
a little complicated, but I'm going to turn off reference now because we're going to do some other stuff.
So do you turn on reference on layer 1 or on
Yeah, layer 1, because I want layer 1
Right.
to be the reference for
anything that goes below?
Exactly.
Right.
So now another thing that I can do is I can use my selection tool. So I go over here to the ribbon, which is select, and I'm going to pick automatic. Automatic means that it is automatically going to select the entire enclosed space there. So what it is, that blue is not actually blue, it's just telling me I've selected that part of it. Okay, so I'm on that layer. But now what I can do is I can add a new layer. I'm adding another layer, I'm putting it below. And that layer, that selection mask, applies not just to the layer where the drawing is, but also to the layer below it. So now when I pick another color, let's pick the salmon color. No, I'm going to pick the blue color. When I pick that blue and I drop it in, I'm dropping it into the cup, but again, it's on a separate layer there, you see. So that's again a useful way of capturing that really quickly, coloring in that whole complicated shape instantly like that. So that's great. Okay, so that's selecting. So far we've gone through hand coloring, the layer below, dropping it in, reference, and select. So now I'm going to try something even a bit more complicated. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my layer and I'm going to add a new layer on top. Okay, so layer 5 is now sitting on top of layer 1. I'm going to pick a new color. I'm going to pick green, let's say, and I'm going to drop it in. I still have my selection here, so I want to change that. I want to turn it off. And now I'm going to take this green and I'm going to drop it in. And what happens when I drop it in when there's no drawing? It just covers the whole layer, right? So when I look at my layer here, it's green. The whole thing is green. But that isn't necessarily a problem. I'll show you why. So I'm going to drag this down below my teacup. It's sitting down below the teacup. Kind of looks like the whole background's green. That's not really what I intend to do. What I want to do is I want to turn that blue background into green. So what I do is I go to layer 5, and now I refer to it as a clipping mask. And you see what it's done? It's turned that blue into this green color. Only where the blue was. It's clipped that green to be that. You see? So what's interesting about that is now I can take this green and I can say, you know what, I'm going to go to my adjustments layer. I'm going to take hue, saturation, and brightness, and I can slide this And now look what I'm doing. I'm changing that to any color I want it to be. I can make it darker, I can make it lighter, I can make it more or less saturated. And again, all of this is happening just on that layer 5. So when I turn that off, my blue is still there. It hasn't changed. You see, so you can see how that could be really valuable, right? Because this is called non-destructive editing. I'm not destroying the things I've done below. Everything is still separate, but I can control it. So that's pretty helpful. So, so those are 2 more ways of changing the color. One by using a clipping mask of a solid, by changing the color, and by manipulating the density of it, the darkness, the lightness. Okay. Now let's try one other thing here. Let's go back to our layer, and let us select this background here. Whoops. Clear that. So what's happening now is it's selecting too much. It's selecting the background as well. Now why is that? I'm not sure yet. I'll figure it out in a second. So my selection threshold is really high. That's the reason. So when I go above to 100, it selects too much. It selects the whole background. But if I slide my pen back along it, I only am selecting the bottom.
Right, so for the selection you can tap,
Tap
or
and
you
slide
can
your
slide,
yes,
so you
you're
can
sliding your pencil back and
expand,
forth, right? So that's increasing the
I
threshold.
forgot about that.
So now,
yes.
so now I've selected that whole background. So I'm going to open a new layer that goes below, and I'm going to make that brown. Let's say, okay. So now when I look at my layer, which should not be a clipping mask, now there I have this whole background is colored brown as if it was a wooden table. But now let's say I want to do something even cooler. I want to add another layer, and I'm going to go over here to insert a photo. And what I like to do is I like to go out and collect photos of textures. So I have a big folder of all these textures, fur and cabbages, and when I see like an interesting splotches on a plaster wall, I'll take pictures, pieces of paint, all kinds of things. So I'm just going to take this picture of some wood that I photographed, and I'm going to expand it so it's big. I'm going to turn it sideways. So it's now sideways. But obviously it's covering the whole thing. That's not what I want. So I go back to my layers, and I make it into a clipping mask. And now suddenly I have a wooden table.
It's like magic.
Isn't that cool?
Uh-huh.
So, and then let me try one more thing. I want to just complete this picture by filling in that background. So again, I'm going to, let's do it by selecting. Again, I have so many choices of ways of doing this, but whoops. I'm going to go back to my layer. I'm going to select, my background. And then I'm going to take another color and I'm going to put it in the background. So there you go. So, and we can keep playing with this, but this is, I think a lot of people are afraid of layers, but as you can see, this is the power of them and how neatly it keeps everything. So I can now go in and I can take any one of my colors and I can just change it, and I can adjust it. And I can also, have these as masks, so I can do airbrushing. I can do all kinds of different things, just playing around with these layers and different ways of doing color. There's my teas now. My teacup's full.
Fantastic. That's not just one tip. That's 10?
10 tips. I think there were
10
10
tips.
altogether.
Yeah. So I think especially the selecting tool, I forgot about that. So that was a really good reminder. And I like the, what was it again? The reference one. I don't use that either, but the other one, the clipping mask, I have used that a lot, and I like it because you can add those textures.
You can also move things around. So you could put
Right.
something into a clipping mask and then slide it back and forth.
Right.
And it'll just reveal that part that's cut in the mask. So
Yeah.
that can be really helpful. You can
Yeah.
make it bigger and smaller. You can bend it and twist it. You can change its color. It's
endless.
Endless.
That's the thing, it's never really finished because you can keep on changing it.
Right.
So, well, there's a Draw Tip Tuesday, which was quick and not just one tip, but 10. It should be Draw Tips Tuesday.
Draw tips. Did we mention that this is using Procreate?
Yes.
Procreate
Yeah.
on the iPad and using the Apple Pencil. You could use other styluses. There may be other applications that do a lot of these things. This is the one I think is the best. This is the one that I use. and
Yeah,
really like.
someone.
And it's $10, so
It is really worth it. But if you have, because someone asks about Android, and I also see that Dana has answered that. Sketchbook by Autodesk is a good Android alternative. So if you don't have an Apple, an iPad, then you can use that for your Android tablet. So this was a quick one. I love it. Thank you so much. You
Sure.
have explained it very well, and I think we all need to go back and rewatch and try it for ourselves. And if you are playing with all these tips and you're making stuff, then I hope by now you know what to do. You need to post it on social media and hashtag DTT in action so we can see what you made. And I will definitely also do one very soon. With my cracked iPad, by the way, I will get that fixed soon.
Thank you, Heatwave.
Yes, and also you should stay tuned because this was just 10 little tips, and there is a lot more to learn. And Danny has actually created a whole course with so many tips and so much expertise and so much good stuff to start creating on your iPad. We are working towards launching that. That will be, I need to...
September 9th.
Yes, thank you. September 9th. So stay tuned for that.
We'll be releasing it. I think you'll be able to sign up for it around the beginning of September, or maybe late August. We're just putting the final touches on it right now. But it's going to have... it's 4 weeks long. It's going to have, I don't know, hundreds of things like this, tips that will help you to learn the basics, but also I'm hoping will help to inspire you and help you to think about digital art making and iPad differently, because I think a lot of us like this iPad, right? I mean, I think you felt that way too. I know I felt that way. Ugh, I like pens and paper, but when you get into the iPad, it's a great additional tool to use once you start to think of it differently, and it's an amazing, fun thing to play with too.
I definitely needed to grow into it, but once I started, it's magical. It's just another fantastic tool to make art.
Exactly.
So stay tuned for that. Well, I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out. And thank you, Danny. Bye.